Hi, in this lecture you will learn what the mutating table errors are and how to solve that error by using the compound triggers. So what are the mutating table errors? Sometimes you may want to make some checks using the same table in the trigger. For example, like in the previous lecture, you may want to restrict two high salaries based on their department ID averages. We did it easily by using the compound trigger, but assume that we do that with a before or after each row trigger. This time we will try to get the average salary of the specified row's department with a select query in the trigger and make a comparison with the new salary. The problem starts right here, because Oracle does not let us query from the same table within some triggers while we are currently making some modifications on that table. So what are these triggers? You get the mutating table errors if you want to query the same table within the row level triggers or statement level triggers only if they are fired as a result of on-delete cascade. So you get this error within the row level triggers, but you get this error with the statement level triggers only if these triggers are fired with the delete cascade constraint. I mean, the base table of the trigger is bounded to another one with the delete cascade constraint. And when a row in the other table is deleted, the related row in our table will also be deleted with the delete cascade constraint. If so, our statement triggers will also have mutating table errors. But the key thing in mutating table errors is, in its trigger, you must make a change on that table with an insert, update, or delete, or query from the base table with that trigger. If not, there is no problem. Great! We know that you can assign new values within the triggers easily with the qualifiers. There is no problem with that. But you cannot write an update command about the base table into that trigger. Or you cannot delete or you cannot query from that trigger. You will understand better when you see the examples. Actually, these mutating table errors are created deliberately by the Oracle developers to prevent data inconsistency. Because there is a change on that table, so if you query from that table, each query will return a different result, or if you try to update a row that is currently being modified, this will also corrupt the change of the user. And this is not a good situation. So Oracle developers decided to return an error if an existing table is queried or modified again inside of the related triggers. Great. Now let's look at deeper with mutating tables. Again, what is a mutating table? A mutating table basically means that a table being modified by an insert, update, or delete statements. Or a table that is updated by the delete cascade constraint of another table. A different table might update that table with the delete cascade constraint. So since this table is also being modified, this table is also called as mutating table. Row level triggers cannot query or modify a mutating table. Since statement level triggers are run before or after the changes occur, at these times our table is not considered as mutating. So in these triggers, you can query or modify the base table, no problem. But within the before row or after row triggers, you cannot query or update the base table. This restriction prevents inconsistent data changes. Since the data in that table has a change, and any explicit change will make the data inconsistent, this restriction prevents the inconsistency of that data. Views being modified by the instead of triggers are not considered as mutating. Since we do the modification inside of the instead of trigger, this is not considered as mutating. Great, now you know what a mutating table error is. So let's see how we can handle that error. We can handle mutating table errors with a couple ways. The first one is store related data in another table. If you get the error because of querying the same table, you can store that data that you want to query into a different table. Since you will query from another table, you will not have a mutating table error. The second one is store related data in a package. Actually, this is not a perfect usage because you can do that only within the before statement triggers. This might be useful when you get the mutating table error with the statement level triggers and undelete cascade constraints. The third one is using the compound triggers. Actually, the solutions above used before the compound triggers are available. Instead of using them, now we use the compound triggers to handle that problem. Because we know that we can use all the timings of triggers in one trigger by creating a compound trigger. So if you want to get some data to compare with others, you can get the data within the before statement section and then use it inside of the row level triggers to make your comparisons easily. Or you can make some updates, deletes, etc. within the before statement or after statement sections. Basically, you can handle all the possible mutating table problems by using the compound triggers. If, however, you cannot solve a mutating table problem by using the compound triggers, just don't try to do that with another way. Instead, try to change your business logic. Do that with your application or in the middle tier and avoid using the database triggers. But first, you should try the compound triggers, of course. This will most probably solve your problem. By the way, if you create a function that needs to query or make modifications of a table, and if you use that function within a statement that modifies the same table, this function will also cause a mutating table error. Because, like in the triggers, you are trying to query or modify a table which is currently being changed, and it is an invalid usage. Besides, in a trigger, some people think that if I take these queries or updates, etc., into a function or procedure or a package, this will solve the problem. But no. Even if you do your modifications in a different place, since you will run that inside of your row level trigger, you will also get a mutating table error. Alright, now you know what the mutating table errors are, why you get them, and how to solve them. Now let's make some examples of that. So let's open up the SQL Developer. Let's first create a trigger that gets the mutating table error. In this example, like the previous compound trigger example, we will prevent the salaries which are greater than 15% high of the average salary of its department. But this time, we will do that with a before insert or update trigger. So let's create it. Create or replace trigger trg mutating apps. Before insert or update on employees copy. For each row. And now we will declare the interval and the average salary variables. I simply write declare and the interval, its number, and the value is 15. And the average salary, it's a number, and our begin keyword. Now first, we will get the average salary of the current row's department into our variable. So I simply write select average salary into our variable from employees copy, and there department ID is equal to new dot department ID. Now let's make our check and raise the application error. If new dot salary is greater than the average salary, let me correct here because this must be the average salary too. And now plus the average salary times the interval divided by 100. And then raise application error. Let's write something like that. And our message. A raise cannot be concatenate that with our v interval and again concatenate that with percent higher than its department's average. And our end if and our end keyword. Now let's compile it. Great, our trigger is ready. Now we can test it. But first, let's disable all the other triggers of the employees copy table. Instead of doing this one by one, let's write a code and disable all the triggers. Alter table, employees copy, disable all triggers. And now let's create our trigger again to make it enabled. And let's check from here. Great, as you can see, we are ready. Now let's open up another worksheet and make our test. For example, let's make an update. Update, employees copy, set salary is equal to salary plus 1000, where employee ID is equal to, let's say, 154. Now let's run it. As you can see, we have the mutating table error. It says our table is mutating, so the trigger or function may not see it. The cause is our trigger or function attempted to look at or modify a table that was in the middle of being modified by the statement which fired it. And in the action, it says rewrite the trigger or function. So now we will change our trigger. How? Actually, as you remember, we have handled that problem already. We did it with our previous compound trigger. Now let me open it and show you the actual solution. As you remember, we did the same job in this example, but within a different way. We did the same business within the compound trigger and did not have any mutating table error. So how we did that? We got all the averages of departments from the same table, but within the before statement triggering section. So, since no change occurred in our base table yet, we can easily query or change that table. So we don't get any mutating table error. And since we got the whole averages into a collection, we could easily use these values in our after each row section. With this way, we could handle the possible mutating table error. As you can see, it is so simple and efficient. So, can we make any DMLs on our table in our compound trigger? Of course. We know that if we try to run a DML statement inside of our row level triggers, we get a mutating table error. But with compound triggers, we don't. So let's try to make one. First, let's try to do that within our after each row section. I will write a simple update. It's just to show you. It will not change anything, but we will make an update at the end. So let's write update employees copy set commission percentage. Let me copy that. Is equal to commission percentage again. Now let's compile it. And disable the previous trigger. Now let's run the previous update command. Let's clear up, close here, and run it. As you can see, even if we use the compound trigger, we got the mutating table error anyway. Why? Because even if you use the compound trigger, you cannot query or modify the same table within the row level sections. You need to do this within the statement level sections. So now let's cut that and paste it into the before and after statement sections. And compile it. And now let's run our update statement again. Oops, we got another error this time. It says maximum number of recursive SQL levels exceeded. So what does that message mean? Basically it says you called that trigger inside of that trigger again, and it called itself again, and that will continue like that forever. So the server stopped it. So how did we do that? We run an update command for the base table within our trigger. So that update also fired this trigger again. So an update occurred in that too, so it fired that trigger again. So our code fell into an infinite looping situation. But this is not possible to make. That means you cannot take the same action with the triggering events of the triggers. I mean, if your trigger runs for inserts and updates, you cannot make an insert or update on the base table inside of that trigger. If so, can we make any delete? Let's try. Let's first delete the onDelete action from the events area. And change the update codes with the delete code. Delete from employees copy and where employee ID is equal to 100. Now let's copy that and paste into here. Great, now let's compile it. And run the update command again. As you can see, this time it worked. Now, let's query from the employees copy table. As you can see, the employee 100 has gone. So what we understand from here? We understand that basically using DML commands inside of the before and after statements are valid. We can use it. But if our DML also fires the same trigger again, we fall into an infinite loop trigger fires. So we cannot do that. But we can run any DML commands that will not fire the same triggers. So now let's roll back our changes. And delete the delete commands in our trigger. And compile again. Now let me sum up. In a row level trigger, if we query from the same table, or if you modify the same table with a DML command, you get the mutating table error. There are a few ways to handle that mutating table error, but the most efficient one is using the compound triggers. With compound triggers, you can handle that problem. But there are a few restrictions here too. The first one is you cannot make a change or query inside of the row level sections of that compound trigger. The second one is if you run a DML command inside of the statement level sections, and if this DML will also run that trigger again, this time you get another error because of that recursive SQL. Otherwise, you can make DMLs in the statement level sections and query from that table without any problem. With this way, you will be able to solve the mutating table errors. By the way, what I mean with the DML is the DMLs that are executed on the base table of that trigger. the amounts to other tables are accepted. No problem on that. Alright, in this lecture, you learned what the mutating table errors are and how to solve them. So this is the end of this lecture. See you in the next lectures.